We are the Kinsella Trust, a knife crime prevention charity. In this series, we'll be talking to a variety of people who have all been affected by knife crime. They'll be sharing their stories with us, telling us how they managed to cope with such tragedy and what they're doing now to help end knife crime. Some of the topics that we'll be discussing may be upsetting, so listener caution is advised. We'll be sharing some helpful links at the end of the session. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today to talk to us about what happened with Olly and your family. Before we start talking about what happened on that particular day and the run up to that, tell me a little bit about your family and Olly.
Oh, well, there was just me and Olly's dad, Stuart. We've been together a long time. We've married 25 years this November. We had children a little bit later on in life, really. We were both 35 when we had Mia. And then Olly came along when I was 38. And our family was complete.
Yeah.
The only pets we ever had were 2 guinea pigs when Mia was about 10. She was desperate for pets. We always lived in the same house all the time that, the children were growing up and things. It was in a lovely location, lovely community. The school was just up the road. I look back on it now and think, gosh, I used to be quite stressed with work, and Stuart would say the same, but you can look back now and think, it was a lovely sort of childhood for them both to have and for us to have family time together.
That's amazing. And it isn't sometimes as a parent, you look back at our children's childhoods and you think, wow, that was actually a golden time.
Yes.
But at the time, it's particularly stressful because you might be working or traveling and doing different things, just spinning those plates.
Yeah.
And it's not until you have that sort of time afterwards where you look back and you think, wow, we did our best.
That's exactly it.
So talk to me about Olly. Tell me about Olly as a person.
I feel like there's almost like 2 different stories to tell, or a timeline where it kind of changes and the story changes. Olly was always fun-loving, young, from being a toddler through to a young boy, always very focused on different things at different times. So one minute he would love basketball, want to be in the team. The next minute he would have moved on and he wanted a scooter and he wanted to go to skate parks. And there was always something new. And I think with Olly and his friends, he very much was a bit of a leader. He would say, come on, let's do this. And off they'd go. But he was like that with us in our family. We didn't really realise until we looked back that he really was at the centre of everything and really quite in control of the way life moved around him, if that makes sense.
Wow.
I think when we got the diagnosis of his autism, it kind of made sense. But when you're living in a family and how you all are around each other, you don't really notice perhaps what's happening. But looking back on it, it was ideal. It was really, really lovely. And I think primary school for him and for our daughter were golden years. Where things started to change, and we saw the change in Olly, was he started to get very worried in that transition to secondary school.
Yeah.
So in year 6 of primary school, he started to become very sort of worried about that transition, worried about being bullied, thinking that he was overweight or had a weight problem. He became very negative about his own self-image, low self-esteem and things. And he was always one of the tallest in his year, and I think he hit puberty really quite young. And we just sort of noticed, when I look back on it now as well, that was the year he got a phone.
Okay.
So that was the year that he was begging to walk up to school, and I said, we can't really unless we give him a phone, just so we know he's safely arrived. And that was the reason, that's why he got a phone. But you can look back on it now and think, I can remember times where he would be upset when I'd go in, he'd seen something, usually about a child. If he saw another child getting hurt or upset, he would be very upset. But it really opened his eyes to a completely different world that really unsettled and upset him, but he would never talk about it, and it was very hard. So I feel like there was just a change. And then the Olly that was with us until he passed, I don't think he was that happy. I think he was always quite troubled.
Yeah. So while he was in primary school, you said that the world was like centred around him. Lots of friends.
Lots of friends, especially girls. Girls seemed to think he was amazing. And he'd say, oh, no, I haven't got any friends. But he did. He's a popular boy.
But you said that there was a marked difference And just even the lead up between primary and secondary school, he wanted to start walking to school. Was that in year 6, year 7, year 6? Yeah. Year 6. And that's very natural at that age, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
But quite rightly concerned about safety, perhaps thinking, no, he's got to have a phone. And you said that it sort of coincided with that time that he started to behave or feel differently about himself as well.
Definitely. And I think, he was probably seeing things that he really couldn't comprehend, because he was a very, very kind boy. Very, it was no grey for him. It was black or white. And if he liked something, he loved it. He was, very strong feelings about things. And whatever he was seeing was unsettling him. And I think he was trying to find his position still within the group as they kind of transitioned forward. But I think along the way, what social media did for him was opened up the gates to other children in other locations around our town that without it, he would have never met.
Yeah.
Who potentially had the same love of bikes as him, would be how it was started. But I think in that contact with new people, he started to see a different way that things could be. And I think he tried to adapt to become, from being perhaps worrying about low self-esteem and being a little bit overweight, he thought, he suddenly shot up, became very tall, cut back on his eating, and almost like changed physically as well within a very short amount of time from primary to secondary school.
And was that a new group of friends that he met online, or these strangers online that he was? They would have been
strangers really to him. Yeah. But in his mind, he saw them as, new friends just in a different part of the town. But with then the bike and then the access to a bit of freedom as he was kind of growing up, he came across people and situations, I think, that then led him down a wrong path for potentially a short amount of time. When I look back on it, it would have been once he'd started secondary school and that sort of little period of time before the summer when his bike got stolen. He'd been set up and his bike was stolen. So probably only a couple of months where we feel he was criminally exploited, and that took our family down a completely different pathway of family worker, social worker.
Right. How old was Ollie at this point?
12.
Okay. Still so young.
Still so young.
Still trying to find, your place with your friends, with who you are, your identity, and have every right to go out in your local area and feel safe. But you said that he sort of was meeting, because of that freedom that he had with the bike, which again, every child has the right to have that freedom, he was meeting different people.
That's it. And I think what he was seeing as well, because I look back on it and I think there were things that he would say to me and I thought, is he being dramatic? Oh, that can't be true. But I can remember once being up at our local parade of shops and him passing me his phone, and I said, why are you doing that? And he said, in case anybody tries to steal it. And I said, who's going to steal it at the top shops? And he looked at me as if I was mad. And I said, but I'm with you. I'm your mum. I'm next to you. That wouldn't stop anything, he said.
Right.
So, yeah, he I think through what he saw on his phone, images of knives, seeing what other children were doing in our town, he saw the dangers before we even knew they were there.
You said that he was set up and robbed of his bike as well?
Yeah. It's really hard. When I look back to that time, there was so, especially talking to you about this golden time of our family life, I feel like we just went from one world to another into this fearful, really scared what was happening world. But alongside that, and I'll come back to that, there was also Ollie feeling very overwhelmed and questioning himself and why he felt different. So within 14 months, he had an autism diagnosis because he was escalated so quickly through CAMS because there was concern. So the first thing he did was, when we were concerned about his behaviour, we took away his phone and his Xbox one night, only for him to react in breaking out of our house in the middle of the night and running away. That is just incomprehensible still to me to this day, that he would have done that from a loving family, but he saw it in his way, his mind, as we'd taken it away, we didn't like him, so he would just go. And the whole of Thames Valley Police were looking for him because I realised he was missing about 4 o'clock in the morning. He was back by 7 o'clock. because luckily he had gone to a new friend's house and an older brother had let him in. And then when the mum woke up, she saw him on the sofa and brought him back home. But there was that. Then the next thing that happened was he felt really low and he tried to take an overdose. So this was waking up in the night and him passing a little packet of pills, empty pills, and crying, and us realising what had happened. Then it was his bike being stolen. It was just a horrendous time for all of us. And not knowing almost like what to cling on to. Because I think during this time I was trying to understand about neurodivergence and get my head around that. Yeah. But I had no idea about knife crime, criminalisation, nothing.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think any of my friends around me would have either. And that's the other thing, I think, when you're a parent in this situation, you come in on yourself because you're almost ashamed of, why is this going so wrong? What are we doing wrong? Why is he so unhappy? So yes, I think where it all came to a head was he had his bike stolen, his precious bike that he absolutely loved. And it wasn't until he got the trusted a social worker who was amazing. And he spelt it out to him, Ollie, and said, you were set up. They weren't your friends. And it was as if he couldn't see any of that. And I know as part of an autism diagnosis, there are problems with reading people and relationships, but it does break my heart. It breaks my heart.
So you've been describing a lovely childhood that Olly had with your daughter in the family home. You described that there was a really difficult transition between primary and secondary school, and you felt perhaps this is where Olly was sort of going down a different route that you didn't recognise, and it was almost like he was a different Olly to the one that you had parented. Let's look at what happened to Olly now, if that's okay.
Of course.
Are you able to talk to me about what happened in the days leading up to Olly's death?
No problem. So this was around Christmas time. So the run up to Christmas, I think we were all hoping that the new year was going to be sort of like a new start for Olly. And so we were looking forward, as we normally would, for Christmas. Olly seemed absolutely fine until probably Christmas Day. And that he sort of, we could just tell there was something worrying him. He wasn't sleeping at a proper sleeping pattern. He would tend to be up in the night and then slept into the day. We could tell something was worrying him. He didn't want to talk about it. In whatever shape or form we tried to get the information, he wouldn't speak about it. It came to that day and he said that he was going to go and meet a girl that we knew in the field. And so on the day that Olly died, we knew that something was wrong. We'd had brunch together in the morning. He'd helped his dad with some work. And we tried to get from him what was happening. We'd said, we want to see your phone. He'd showed us his phone. We didn't see anything that looked alarming or worrying on it. He then sort of perked up a bit from quite a low mood and said he was going to see the girl that he knew, who we all knew. So we didn't think too much about it.
How old was she?
Just slightly older. So Olly was just 13 and she was 14. So she was the year above. But Olly did have a lot of friends who were a bit older because he was 1st of November was his birthday. So that was the plan. The time he was like quite a bit, showering, getting ready to go. And then he suddenly wasn't going. And then he was going. And I was thinking, well, are you going or not? And with hindsight, when I went to the door to see him out and I had said to him, because it was January the 3rd, Olly, don't wear sliders, put your shoes on, it might be muddy over there. Nah. Olly, put your coat on, it might be cold. Nah. He wasn't fussed with anything, he just wanted to go. And I looked out and normally I would see how the girl had arrived. She would be dropped off and there was no car there. And that should have rung alarm bells, but it doesn't because I just thought, he'll meet her in the field. He said, love you, I'll have my location on because he always knew I wanted to know where he was. But he was literally going on our road, across the road is a lovely open parkland, which we're so lucky to have, called Bugs Bottom. So he was going to meet her. I thought they would probably go up to the top bench, which he liked sitting on, and they would have a chat there. So off he went. And the next thing I know is this fierce knock on the door. And I thought, oh, they're back. That's my first thought, they're back.
Yeah.
I went to the door and it was a boy that we knew, and he just said, Ollie's been stabbed. And I just remember screaming at him, what? Ollie's been stabbed. And then I ran. Stuart was upstairs in the bedroom, and his sister was too, Ollie's sister. So I shouted up to them, and they came storming down the stairs. Stuart ran, no shoes on, straight out of the house, saying to the boy, where is he? Where is he? And then I remember just putting on my trainers as quick as I could, and daughter was the same, and off we went. I remember seeing our next door neighbour next door, and him saying, are you all right? And me saying what had happened. And I was quite relieved because he was fire and rescue and ex-military.
Okay.
He'd have first aid skills. I thought, brilliant. He's coming with us.
Yeah.
We'll be all right. So off we ran as fast as we could. And as we were reaching the brow of the hill, we saw a group of people just stood stationary, and somebody right next to Ollie trying to do cardiac compressions. And Stuart was as close as he could get to Ollie on his hands and knees. He was screaming, my boy, no. And I was aware of our daughter coming. Stuart noticed she was coming, and so he ran over to her and kept her to one side. They were both screaming. They were so angry. And I just went into shock. And I just remember thinking, right, let's just make sure that Ollie's being looked after.
Yeah.
If there's a chance to save him, let's try and save him. And I was just focused on that. The police came very quickly. They asked who were the family. I said, I'm the mum. They came over and they said, what was he doing over here? I said, he'd come to meet a girl. Is she here now? No, she's not here now. Right, we need to talk to her. So they said, do you know where she lives? So I said, I know where she lives, but I don't know the number. I'll have to call her mum. So I called her mum, and she picked up, and I said what had happened.
Yeah.
And she said she was going to collect her. And I said, the police want to talk to her. What number do you live at? And she gave the house number. And I said, the police are going to come to talk to her.
Yeah.
And she said, how is he? And I said, they're trying to save him. And she wanted to talk more to me, but I cut off the call because I'd got the information. I'd given that to the police. And I just wanted to then check back in on Ollie. And they were doing everything they possibly could. And I just looked at him and I thought, just leave him alone. You could see he was dead.
Oh my God.
You could see he was dead. And they're trying with the cardiac compressions, and his little feet are just off at one side. One slide has fallen off. His sweatshirt's all pulled up. And I just wanted to straighten him all up and tidy him all up and say, come on, but that wasn't going to happen. So me and my friend prayed for him. She said, come on, let's pray. And then an ambulance arrived. Then a helicopter arrived with a surgeon that had come from the south coast. What we realised now was the lady who'd come across Ollie stumbling back up the path after what had happened. She was a cardiac nurse, so if anybody could have saved him, she'd have saved him. But in the girl luring him out to have a fight with the boys who were angry with him, there was a fight that broke out between him and the older boy.
Yeah.
Ollie was coming off better. The younger boy stepped in and stabbed him in the back and in the chest. They fled.
Yeah.
They weren't alone, those children. There were 3 other children with them who had come along to watch this fight.
And how old were these children?
They were 13 or 14.
Yeah. And known to Ollie?
So, yes, vaguely, very knew of them, but I think tried to steer clear of them.
Yeah.
And obviously knew that they were angry with him because of what he had done to try and protect another boy.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't have gone into the field that day if he knew that they were going to be there. She lured him out to his death.
How does that make you feel now, looking back?
I can't even, I think Stuart and I both have said we can't think about the children who did this to him. We can't, because it could absolutely drive you mad.
Yeah.
So we've focused everything into Ollie's work.
Yeah.
But that day back in the field where we just all stood there and everyone tried and everyone did all they could, and it was getting dark and it was drizzling, and Olly had gone out of the door and he was dead really within 15 minutes. But there was then a further hour and a quarter while everyone tried to save him, and a surgeon tried to do an operation on him.
In Bugs Bottom, in the field?
She flew in and they went into the back of another ambulance and they tried to save him. But then she came and she told us, "I'm so sorry, but we've been working on." I said, "I know, we've seen everything you've done. We've seen, when they put the plates on and then it jolts the electric shock. We saw that happen. They tried everything. So we knew that. And we knew he wasn't going to just magically be better. We knew that as well. But she said, "Do you want to see him?" And so we went into the back of the ambulance. And bless him, they just wrapped him up in this like gold, almost like, when you've done a run in a marathon and you get wrapped in. It was something like that. He had a tube out of his mouth. And I just said, "Oh, Olly, I can't believe. I'm so sorry this has happened to you. I love you." And that was all we could do, because we couldn't touch him or we couldn't get close to him. And Stuart said some words to him and our daughter did too. And you know what's been the hardest thing with Olly's death is leaving him places. So we had to get out of the ambulance and we had to say goodbye. Walk home, the three of us on our own back through the field.
How do you even do that?
I don't know. And then the next time we saw him, he was at the Reading Hospital and I had to say goodbye to him. Then we saw him at the funeral directors, and you see him and then you say goodbye again. And it's the saying goodbye at the crematorium it's the saying goodbye. It's always the hardest bit. In that aftermath, you're left just reeling and you don't understand it all. And really, it was just through the work of Thames Valley Police, all the hard work they did around the collection of data. Olly's murder was planned over 11 different platforms of social media. The way that the police got the information, which was hard to get because there had been a lot of deletion of information, apps and images and files and things off the children who killed him's phones. So what they had to do was seize a lot of other phones, children's phones, to actually piece together communications. And that's how they did it. And what it showed was that the girl had been recruited to set Olly up and lure him out.
For what reason?
So what had happened was, and again, we only found this out when it went to court, was that Olly was part of a Snapchat group with these two boys that killed him. And on it, they shared an image of a boy who'd been humiliated, patterned. And the boys were laughing, and the laughing emoji, and just thought it was funny. Whereas Olly would have known that that was wrong. And so he took a screenshot of that and he sent it to the boy who'd been Patton's older brother.
Okay.
Who had quite a scary reputation in our town. The boys knew that and they called Olly a snitch or a grass.
Right.
So they were angry, and that was their beef, was that he had done this. And so that was their only reason, really.
So Olly was... Why do you think perhaps Olly had told the older brother in order to...
I think Olly always stuck up for the underdog. He always protected his friends, and he wouldn't have liked the fact that that younger boy had been humiliated like that and that people were laughing. He would have hated that.
How did your family manage to cope through this time? I can't even begin to I cannot begin to imagine how it feels to go through what you've described.
I know that grief's different for everybody, and I know even in our the three of us, and the wider picture of our family and community, it's everybody, it's different. But for us, we tended to retreat when we were really, really upset and not put that onto the other members of our family. I think there was a feeling of we can hardly bear our own grief to bear anybody else's. But we were always there for each other. but it's not something that we openly kind of discussed, or I think we were just so shocked that it was almost that just trying to understand it was hard enough and get our head around it all.
Without having to support other people with their understanding of it as well.
That's it. Yeah.
And I just can't even imagine how it would feel as a family to go through something like that.
Mm.
You've got a daughter who's older than Olly?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How's it impacted her?
Oh, horrendously. It's really been hard for her. And we're so proud of her because, you know, she was just starting A levels and it happened in that January. So she had to go back a year, and she did manage to get herself to complete those A levels. She's always had a job. She's wonderful, but it's had a horrible impact on anxiety for her.
Yeah.
And loss. It's just an unbearable loss. And I think to this day, it's very, very hard for her to talk about Olly, her brother.
Mm. As in even the happy times?
I'd say recently it's just started to get a bit easier.
Yeah.
I think it's just too much. Yeah, it's just been too much. But yeah, she is starting to. And every time we can, the three of us have a conversation. And, you know, even things like, I never thought we'd go out for a meal again together because we'd think, where's Olly?
Of course.
But time, gradually, we've done that. And now we're at the point where he's included in that. So we'd say, oh, what would Olly have to eat? Or do you remember when we went? And so he's there with us. And I think that's how we cope.
And like you said, it's going to be unique for anyone that goes through that experience, and unique for each family member as well, to deal with that grief in their very personal ways. And it will take different time to process what you've been through. Mm. I know as a family, you've got huge strength. What have you done since Olly's murder? What have you done with regards to campaigning for safer social media and continuing? I know you call it Olly's work.
That's it.
Which I think is just wonderful that, you know, you're doing this with his name, his legacy.
That's it. Olly's work has been our saviour. We said very early on, this is just so wrong. It is so wrong for the world that our children are living in. We've got to do something. And I think along this route, we've met other bereaved parents, whether it's due to a loss of their child through social media harm or knife crime. And there's a certain solidarity in being with those people who have felt the same and live with the same pain that you do.
Yeah.
But we wanted to do something. And so we've campaigned, we've raised money, and we've picked the charities that we want to support, the Kinsella Trust and 2 local Reading charities that think about children's mental health and neurodivergent children.
It's amazing that you continue to do that work despite everything that you've been through, to have the strength to do that. So we've spoken so much about Olly today and all that you've been doing towards, you know, campaigning for safer online platforms for young people, the fundraising you've been doing towards mental health and knife crime charities. And this is all in Olly's name. How would you, as his mum, how would you like Olly to be remembered?
Do you know what Olly stands for? And his sister said this recently about how proud she is of him, and we all are, is that even if it got him into trouble, he would always protect the underdog. He would always protect his friends. He was always kind to younger children, and he looked out for people, and he cared if they were upset. And I think that wanting to protect and wanting to support other children, that's his legacy, because that's what Olly was like. And if he can have some fun in the middle of it somewhere, then he'd love that even more.
Let's merge the two together.
Definitely.
Well, it sounds like you're honouring his name by doing all the work that you're doing. Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you for coming here, talking about Olly and the work that you're doing to keep his name alive and his work going. We appreciate everything that you do for the knife crime charities, the mental health charities. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. And I love talking about Olly at any time.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our wonderful guests for sharing their experience. And thank you too for listening to the Kinsella Trust podcast. If you've been affected by knife crime or have been a victim of crime, you can get support from victimsupport.org.uk or from supportline.org.uk. And Catch 22 also offer victim support services in some areas. For help with bereavement, visit cruise.org.uk, and Mind offer a range of mental health support services at mind.org.uk. Finally, to find out more about the Ben Kinsella Trust and the services we offer, visit our own website at benkinsella.org.uk. We can't solve knife crime until everyone recognises this issue and their own role within it by sharing this podcast with friends and family on your social media or WhatsApp groups. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can stop knife crime.